Okay, can everyone hear me? Give me the thumbs up.
Yes.
Good.
Okay, welcome everyone. This is our agenda for today. We're going to do a little bit of housekeeping at the beginning, things like some logistics, including the fact that we're recording. Then we're going to go through who is hosting this event. This is a bit of an unusual event for the New York Climate Reality chapter. We are co-hosting with the Queens Climate Project, and we want to take a little time at the beginning to make sure that you know who we are. And then we're going to walk through a little bit about New York City's climate laws with gratitude to Joey at the New York City Accelerator, who's joined us to do that today. And finally, we're going to wrap up with a case study of what it looks like to green a building with a particular focus on a co-op, which I know is one of the most sticky, challenging pathways to greening, thanks to Michael here, who has already started down that path. We are aiming to have this conversation be less than an hour and a half. So stick with us through as long as you can, and we're going to be on the call. The folks here who are hosting this event will be on the call a little bit over that time in case anyone wants to stick around and chat with us after more informally. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping to get started. First of all, can the people on New York Climate Reality and Queens Climate Project team just raise your hand virtually or in chat so everybody knows you are? These are your hosts for today. Yay, I love to see all the waving hands. So if you have any questions, you can talk to any of these folks. You can chat them directly if you'd like as well. Just so you know, we are all part of developing these programs. And if you are curious yourself to join us, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. You'll see that I think Deepa bravely muted as many as possible as they were joining. Just stay on mute when you're not talking. I know we all have made that mistake. I myself have, and then a fire truck goes by and it can be unintentionally disruptive. So thank you for doing that. But we do want to hear from you. So when the time comes, we're definitely going to have Q&A. And we want to hear your voice. You don't need to put everything into the chat. Just know that it's there in case you have questions that you want to write down throughout the discussion. You probably saw on your screen that a recording dialog box came up. We're recording this for posterity's sake, and it'll go up on the website afterwards. And I think I said this earlier, for those of you who joined on the dot, feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself, including your name, what neighborhood around the city you live in, and any context you'd like to share on your building, whether you live in a large building or a small one-to-family home. And with that, I'm really excited to turn this over to Faith Cummings, who is a freelance journalist and editor, and she's been centering women's experiences in her writing and journalism since 2014. Her work has been featured in Cut, Vogue, British Vogue, and many other places. And she is also a fearless climate reality project leader and the co-chair of the New York Metro chapter. Faith, can I pass it over to you?
Of course. Thank you so much. I hope everyone is having a great night. Thank you so much for coming. So about the Climate Reality Project, I was trained in July of 2020. So it was Paul, who's my co-chair for the chapter. And if you've never heard about what we do at Climate Reality, we are an organization that was started in 2006 by Al Gore. Perhaps you know him as the former Vice President of the United States, or you know him as a Nobel laureate, or maybe you know him for all his work that he's done with climate change that has made him someone who people look up to all over the world. Or if you are an elder millennial like myself, perhaps you've used the phrase Al Gore's internet, because he promoted legislation in the 80s and 90s that actually helped to develop ARPANET and the internet. So, very smart guy, has done a lot of great things. And with Climate Reality, what he has aimed to do with all the incredible folks and activists that he works with is to really help all of us be trained on speaking about climate change, and educating everyone in our communities, that it's not just elected officials like himself or celebrities, but that any of us can have the tools to really be able to speak about this, and we need everyone involved. So in 2017, the Climate Reality New York City Metro chapter became one of the first chapters in the organization and one of the largest. We are still one of the largest, and we are proud of that. And what we do is we're really continuing the project's mission on the ground across New York City, and we aim to create a just, environmentally responsible, and innovative green New York City. So no small feat. And what we love to do is really connect community members through events, through chapter meetings like this, through, many kind of volunteer opportunities in person, lobbying. And we really want to build leadership to create change and facilitate action on the ground. So next slide, Anjali, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. So here, if you want to take out your phones, we have some QR codes so you can get some more information about joining our chapter or joining the training. So there are about 50,000 trained leaders all over the world, which is a really, really huge cohort that we're proud to be a part of, and about 2,000 in New York City. And what's really exciting is in just a couple of months, we are going to be at the Jacob Javits Center in New York City doing our next in-person training. So we're hoping it's our biggest one yet. Everyone that you see here in our chapter will definitely be there. Most of us are probably going to be mentors, so you can get some more up close and personal action with us and ask us some questions. But we really encourage you to join, whether you want to, sign up and try to become a mentor, or whether you just want to join the training because you never have. I can't recommend it enough. It is really a great way to spend the weekend. And what's cool is that you'll get to really meet a lot of people in person. Since many of us were trained virtually, moments like this are what's really exciting and kind of help us to build our community. So please feel free to ask us any questions later on, but you can definitely get more information this way. So yeah. And I think next I'm going to hand it over to Michael for a little bit to talk about the Queen's Climate Project.
Thank you, Faith. I'm Michael Parrella with the Queen's Climate Project. We're a volunteer organization in Queens, and so one of our visions is to advocate for strong, equitable energy policy in our communities. We also have a vision that we share with many people for across the borough, city, and state to run entirely on renewable energies across all sectors of the economy. And we want to achieve that vision through advocacy, coalition building, community education, et cetera. We have you can check out our website, which I think someone put in the chat, so thank you for that. We have a Green Buildings Task Force, which I'm part of, policy advocacy work that we do, as well as a composting task force, which is also exciting too. So just some things about us. We're all volunteers, mostly in Queens, but yeah, always looking to partner and do other things.
Yeah, and so it's really cool that we get to partner with y'all for this. We don't always do that. And if I didn't mention, I'm from Queens, which, like, as a Queens person, not saying that up front is very strange, but wanted to make sure I added that. And so from both of us, we really want to give a huge thanks to New York Renews. So New York Renews is a huge coalition of over 370 groups now, and they go to Albany quite a bit to mobilize for pro-climate justice and jobs budget. So they really are leading the charge when it comes to progressive climate law. So can't thank them enough. And that's one of the actions that, we would love for you all to take, is just to join and to be able to, get informed and maybe join folks in Albany when you can. Another thing that we would love you to do is to email the New York State legislative leaders to pass the Climate Change Superfund Act and the People's Climate Justice Budget and the 2024 budget. So these are really major. I'll just speak a little bit about each so that you know. So for the Climate Change Superfund Act, this is super important because it establishes the Climate Change Adaptation Cost Recovery Program to require companies that have contributed significantly to the buildup of climate warming greenhouse gases in the atmosphere to bear a share of the cost of needed infrastructure investments. If you are a New Yorker like myself, you've probably said many, many times, where are my taxes going? Or I don't want to pay, have my taxes go to anything else that I don't know. This is going to be super, super important. So we're really focused on that this year. And then the People's Climate Justice Budget is a $1 billion spending plan that outlines really crucial climate and environmental justice programs that New York is required to fund via the newly created Climate Action Fund in 2024, literally pretty much just right now, as a down payment on the more than $10 billion a year that the state estimates is necessary to address the climate crisis. So really, really crucial and critical. And then last, we want to invite businesses to sign on for the climate justice leadership. So there's a lot to be done, but these are just ways that we take action. We have an advocacy group as part of our chapter as well. So we can put the link in the chat for you all to be able to join that. They meet regularly and go up to Albany and talk about new policies that are coming through. So we're really happy that, folks in our chapter are doing that work all the time. And then I think I will pass it back to Michael to talk more in depth about more things that QCP is doing.
Actually,
I am just pulling off of my slide deck here. Okay, so next on our agenda, we're actually going to pass it over to Joey to talk about York City Accelerator. And Joey is going to share his own slides. So I'm going to pass it over to Joey to do that. Just a quick introduction on Joey. He is an account manager with the New York City Accelerator. He is also a New York climate reality leader. And he formerly worked at NYCR. So Joey brings to us basically that perfect combination of what it means to electrify buildings. So thank you for being here, Joey.
Thank you, Anjali. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me and everyone can see my screen.
We can hear you.
Great. Yeah, no, it's an incredible honor to be able to speak here and advocate for my not only civic engagement, volunteer group, but also, why I came into this, which was building decarbonization. So it's a hard line to walk when it comes to the person that you're going to be working with, but also the person that's volunteering to, get you to work with that people. But I think I do it pretty well. But regardless, I digress. So what's happening right now in terms of New York City is they have passed some very aggressive legislation, globally leading legislation, I should add, when it comes to building and also just generally decarbonization, statewide legislation. So 68% of New York City's emissions come from buildings. 90% of those buildings will still be here by 2050. We have that goal in terms of 85% reduction by 2050. So we have adjusted our legislation as such. So New York City is aiming to be carbon neutral by 2050. And they have put such measures to ensure that that will happen, which comes through building dark carbonizations policies, free technical assistance, which is New York City Accelerator, economic development, and an equitable transition away from fossil fuels. So there are, in fact, incentives and programs in place that will make it streamlined and almost cost effective to do so. But this happened pre-pandemic through the last legislation that we could do this. Therefore, this Climate Mobilization Act came about. And the Climate Mobilization Act is the largest climate solution put forth by any city in the world. It consists of a slate of climate laws designed to dramatically cut carbon in New York City. It's the first of its kind. It's really kind of changing the way, personally, I've seen San Francisco, Boston, they're coming now to the company that I work for to ask about how to administer such a program, such a legislation. And it really requires a help center. When it comes down to it, I've already put my email in the chat, but you really need to get in touch with the New York City Accelerator, because if you live in or operate a building above 5,000 square feet, the New York State Accelerator can provide you with free consultation, essentially. We'll walk you through what climate laws you're subject to. We'll help you develop a scope of work. We'll identify incentives, both on the state and the utility level. We'll connect you with vetted service providers. We could support with financing, and we'll go through the process, what it takes to go through this when it comes to inspections, when it comes to bid review, what have you. So let's go through here. Specifically, Local Law 97, which is why we're all here. Back in 2018, maybe 19, there was a slate of laws that now puts a stake in the conversation when it comes to carbon emissions. The reason why we're all here. We want a safe environment for our kids. We want a safe environment just to live in. We're already seeing the environmental disasters. It's urgent, but now the city is taking action. And if you're a building owner above 25,000 square feet, you need to meet these ambitious carbon reduction targets. So there are 2 opportunities to go through. There are a few more, but I'll get to that later. I really want to focus on these ones right here, which is if you live in a building above 25,000 square feet, over the next several years, aiming towards 2050, you need to meet these carbon reductions. And if you were to reach out to the NYC Accelerator, we'll get to your building specifically. We'll go through, are you subject to Local Law 87, above 50,000 square feet? Are you subject to Local Law 88? Do you need to upgrade your lighting? It's very, very building specific. So that's just a little bit of a teaser. But essentially, when it comes to Local Law 97 and this transition towards quality control over buildings, essentially, the takeaway point here is that as a property owner or operator, it's now a part of owning and operating that property. So let's say if you have some sort of hazard, asbestos, loose bricks, it's now a part of owning the property. You need to ensure that you're operating it responsibly in terms of your carbon output. It's a part of owning a property and administrating that property. So we can get into specifics about what your building does and does not qualify for, but it really comes down to who is benchmarking your building. And benchmarking means every building above 25,000 square feet needs to report their energy consumption to the DOB every year. If you're above 25,000 square feet, every year. 87, a little bit differently. That's 50,000 square feet. Every building above 50,000 square feet needs to conduct an energy audit and complete retro commissioning work every 10 years. It's a little bit different. And I hammer home the fact that you need to work with the NYC Accelerator just to ensure that your building is keeping up to date with all of these nuances when it comes to local law compliance. But now there's a little stick when it comes to all these local law compliance tasks. And it depends as to whether you're a new or existing building, but the big takeaway is local law 97. So let me break it down in terms of how it would look like linearly. So we have a good partnership here with the NYC Sustainability Help Center. This is a help desk specifically supporting benchmarking questions. And if anyone does not know what benchmarking means, I'll reiterate. It is every building above 25,000 square feet needs to ensure that they are working with either their property management or their subcontracted engineering firm, and they are reporting energy consumption and water usage to the DOB. That will change as of 2025 once local law 97 becomes the norm. But you see here in the top right corner, there's a little bit of clouds with a dollar sign, design. That's your consumption. That is your emissions. You can see there, this building has a D. That's the energy grade. And you're benchmarking that your building has consumed that amount of energy, which dictates this energy grade. From there, you need to find out what's wrong. You go for an energy audit. You work towards energy commissioning, retro commissioning measures. If it's a little bit too much for your current reserves, you go towards financing like PACE, or there's NYCR, there's the Green Bank. We have options here for you. Sorry. From there, we're going to go towards these projects. And depending on what you're building, your square footage, you may need to make sure that lighting is the priority. You may need to ensure that the heating system upgrade. It doesn't need to be an overnight fix. It doesn't need to be electrification. Perhaps there's building envelope upgrades, or perhaps your roof is really suitable for solar, or perhaps that there's an opportunity for a ventilation improvement. We need to really get the engineering firm involved here. And once all is said and done, we've applied incentives, we have financing in place, and those greenhouse gas emissions are a little bit more manageable for the foreseeable future. And we can ensure that this is going as we are speaking, because we have an energy snapshot tool and ancillary resources to ensure that we can utilize benchmarking data to see how your building projects with these carbon coefficients. And we'll go through there. So we need to work with the NYC Accelerator. I have the QR code logged up later, but it's going to be very, very building by building specific. But each building representative, whether it be a co-op owner, a property manager, or the boss of whatever company, will provide that technical assistance. We'll go through each and every requirement that that building needs to ensure that they're doing. And we'll connect you with that specific building service provider. We'll ensure that you're doing those incentives. You're entitled to that money. It's on the table. If there's financing needs, we can have that conversation. It's going to be very, very specific to that building in terms of reserves. And if necessary, we have trainings involved too. So I very much encourage you all to take a look at this. It's truly just the email. Just take a look at that. My apologies. But I'll also include my email information. But I'd like to hear what Michael had to say about all this, because he's an individual that really went through the motions when it comes to piecing together these different opportunities, these funding opportunities when it comes down to it.
Cool. Thank you, Joseph.
Yeah.
Should I jump in now, Angela? It's like,
Yeah, actually, maybe we should take some questions from the audience and
perfect.
and you, Michael, as well, if you have any. But I do see one from Emma Morris in the chat regarding buildings and co-ops. Emma, do you want to come on and ask your question out loud?
Hi, yes, hello everyone. I live in a rental building.
Yep.
I don't know the square footage, but we do have a B sign up in our lobby. I see you showed the D for that last building, so ours is a B. But what can I do as a renter? Do I have any options?
Are you in a lease agreement where you'll be fined for non-compliance? I don't think so. So it really comes down to management and who you are leasing from. It's about the building owner in this regard. So if you just rent,
Yeah,
essentially you're okay.
but I'd like the building to be greener. I mean, we have bad washing machines, we have bad dryers that, all could be upgraded. But I just have to go to my landlord and talk to them about it. Is that it?
Yep.
Okay.
It's as simple as that. And I still have it on the screen. You need to provide them with information at this point. And this is really where Michael's presentation will come in handy, because as far as my understanding, this is what happened. A non-decision maker become hero.
I have a follow-up question on that one for you, Joey, or for others on the phone. What happens when the penalties start to kick in if you're a renter?
There is no language within the legislation that puts renters in jeopardy.
So it could theoretically occur that if a landlord chose to not go down this path and comply, could those penalties ultimately get passed down to the renter in essentially rent payment?
Currently, the legislation stands as to the building or borough block and lot owner representative. That is about it. And as far as DOB guidance, so I would not worry in terms of, if the renter increases rent, it's a red flag. I'd get out. This is me speaking personally, but there is no guidance about that. And I, as a NYC Accelerator account manager, unfortunately cannot speak on that. But there's absolutely nothing within the climate legislation that hints as to whether you'll be on the hook. But if you need, you can speak to an attorney to ensure that you're okay.
Can I interject a couple of things? Basically, if energy is passed through to the tenants and tenants are sub-metered, it's a different situation. In this case, in order to meet the law, that landlord, if he makes improvements, he or she makes improvements to the building, it ultimately should result in lower energy costs, and you benefit in that case. This especially applies to commercial, tenancy where very often the energy is passed through in a bulk way to all of the tenants. But this brings to a head the issue of the interest of renters versus owners and energy. And this law is going to shake up a lot of things, and ultimately a lot of good things will come out of that, because we have many, many people that use the energy in their buildings but don't directly pay for it. And it leads to a more wasteful operation of buildings. So ultimately, we're going to improve in a lot of ways.
I love that, Philip. Absolutely. Let's say you're renting. You have no indication of heating. You can blast that radiator as much as you want, but there are some behavioral inputs involved, and there's no utility incentives for behavioral inputs. So there could be a whole other conversation about, energy saving tips. And I do think that the Climate Reality Project is on track to making this, a recurring, conversation opportunity for everyone. So stay tuned for that. But I think, Michael, it's time for you to talk about how you, as a co-op representative, got into this conversation and ultimately led to some decent, headway.
Sure. Thank you for that, Joseph.
I will share screen. I also noticed there are 2 other questions in the chat, and I'm going to invite you, Joey, to see if you can answer them inside the chat. Just respond to them there, if that's okay.
Yeah, no worries. Cool.
Awesome. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you, Angeli, and thank you, Joseph. So my name is Michael Parrella. I'm the co-op board president of a building in Jackson Heights. We are about 50,000 square feet, about 85 years old, 6 stories, pretty typical of the building stock in the neighborhood. I think just before we get into it, it's important to understand, I thought it was important to understand how, as a shareholder, when I first moved into the building, I didn't really know how the building worked. And so serving on the board for a few years, you start to learn how decisions get made, based on what information, and you start realizing how we can make plans to make better decisions and how we can gather more information to make better decisions, more informed decisions. And also understanding how co-op governance works and how the board can function. Having a sense of that in your building is really important. Just to preface this a little bit, I think to respond to the question about rental, rental rates, I don't think this has happened yet, but I suspect, at least in the ownership market, people are buying co-ops. We've already had people who come to our building. We have an A now. We had one. We've always had an A since they've started doing this over the last few years. Buyers come to the building and see the A, and the savvy ones recognize that there's more going on there than just an A. There's some work happening behind the scenes that is a sign, almost like a restaurant grade. It's a sign of something positive happening under the surface. If you go to a building, you see a D, there's problems, and the problems are going to be costly to fix and time consuming to fix. Hopefully there's a plan there to fix them before the fines kick in, but it might not be clear. So the A is an indicator. It doesn't tell you everything, but it's an indicator that the building is on a decent track. So one of the things with the co-op governance is always educating and involving people. So on the next slide, Angeli, this is a quote from a friend of mine from Manhattan. He was disgruntled about his co-op, and he said, "Co-ops are the lowest form of democracy." And he sort of chuckled about that. And he had a point. It was frustrating for him, and I appreciate that. But if we go to the next slide, there's a quote from former Governor Al Smith, who says, "The cure for the evils of democracy is more democracy." In other words, more engagement, more involvement, more education for how we make decisions and work as a community. I think that spirit is so vital to a co-op and how we govern ourselves. We are the owners. We have to take responsibility for that and all of that means. So let's see. Go to the next slide, please, if you would, Angeli. So about 8 years ago, I was on the board still, and we learned about this incentive program from Con Ed. It was our management company brought it to us. It was a minor thing, a few $1,000s of credits through Con Ed. And we decided that it made sense for us to convert our lighting in all of our common areas to LED. And we did that. And if you go to the next slide, you see this inflection point in 2016 where we changed over our lighting, and we knocked our electric bill from about over $8,000 to just around $6,000 a year. So it was 25% savings. The blue is the common area, and the orange is the slide we pay for our super, which is, you know, that remained constant. But the blue area, the blue volume on those bars went down by about 25%. And I didn't even realize this at the time. I didn't gather this information until a few years later. I started realizing that like this stuff actually matters, and it actually can make a difference. And if I can remind my fellow shareholders of this, of these cost savings, it might give us some more momentum going forward. So this is just one example of a very small thing we did. That's probably the first thing we did, you know, in 8 years ago, that was very helpful for us. And showing people the graph of the reality of the savings, people start thinking about what can be done. They start to build momentum. So the next slide, please. Our co-op, this is a picture of our co-op, the facade. On the right-hand side is a picture of the facade just in daytime, in the wintertime. On the left-hand side is a picture of that I took from a thermal imaging camera that just sort of shows our building in a different light, literally. This is infrared radiation emitting from our building. You can see the vertical lines in the facade where the steam risers are inside the building. You can see the sort of yellow band vertically just to the left of right of the center of the image, and the radiators below the windows. And it just sort of tells you that like the building is telling us something. If we can look at it a little bit differently, we can sort of recognize what's happening here. Maybe there's heat loss, maybe there's other things happening, but we have to be cognizant of what's going on in our building. So next slide, please. We were spending, this is a big graph. I apologize. About 10 years ago in 2012, 2013, we were spending about $40,000 a year on energy for heat. And we had no idea what that meant. Was it high? Was it low? We had no idea. Our management company came on board in 2013, a new one, and they said, you know what? If you guys install high efficiency hot water heaters and an energy management system, you can reduce, you'll have savings. So next slide, please. So in that year, in 2013, end of that year, we installed a new management system for our heating system and a new hot water heaters that were higher efficiency. And for 2 years, we had a little bit of savings there, about $5,000 a year, which I think the hot water heaters were, I forget the exact, maybe they were $40,000. It was a small increment of savings back on those. But the heating system really wasn't affected. 2 years later, in 2016, I was realizing how we were paying for it. I had some questions about how it worked, and I started asking management, can we get involved in this? Can we see how it works, how the system actually runs, what the settings are, and really get a look under the hood and see what happens. So next slide, please. In 2016, we started monitoring the energy management system. Basically, what it is it's a computer in the basement that turns the boiler on and off. That's all it does. It's very simple in that regard. But there are wireless sensors around the building. We have 42 units in our apartment, in our building, and so we had about 10 sensors, maybe 12 sensors, and they were all reporting back temperature readings from the various apartments. And we realized the system had been set up kind of poorly. There were some settings that were kind of erratic, so we stabilized the whole building at approximately 72 degrees. And just in doing that, we started to change the culture of the building. This is through me texting people, having quarterly meetings to remind everyone to close their windows, take out air conditioners. We started fixing windows, fixing vent valves on radiators. We're a single pipe steam system in our building. And through this sort of cultural shift, we started owning the heating system for ourselves. And I think it's just worth pointing out that and we reduced our cost by another $15,000, almost cutting it in half from the original $40,000 a year. It's worth pointing out that as shareholders, no one else was incentivized to make those savings besides us. We could say, isn't that management's job? We could delegate to them, but they really weren't motivated. They weren't really incentivized to do that. Their contract doesn't have a benefit if they save that money for us, if they get some piece of it. That isn't how the contracts are written. Maybe some contracts are written that way. But it really is up to the shareholders, the owners, to take that responsibility and claim that benefit for themselves. No one else can do that. We sort of fell off the wagon in 2019 with some oil costs that we had there. We got back on track in 2020. So next slide, please. As of 2020, there's no more. We don't burn number 2 fuel oil anymore officially. We modified our boiler pressure a little bit, and we have our hot water temperature is around 135 or 140, and sort of kept on this path. And this all happened before the benchmarking came into effect. And so when benchmarking came online, and I think it was 2020, maybe Joseph can correct me if I'm wrong, it was in that range, we came out with an A right out of the gate. We were kind of surprised, but but we sort of because of this, it sort of started to make sense that what we were doing was having an effect, and it was now becoming public, and that was kind of a nice thing to see. So before we go on to the next slide, it's just worth mentioning that again the cultural shift in there. And so after this, we started about a year or two later. We started talking with Accelerator, who was really helpful in sort of helping us take the next steps. We knew we had more to do. We knew Local Law 97 had been passed by this point. What else was on it? What else do we have to do? And so they steered us towards an energy audit, and different ways to achieve that. We ended up hiring a company called Bright Power. So next slide, please. And Bright Power, they were one of the approved vendors that the NYC Accelerator recommended. We hired them last year for a nominal sum to put together a report to look at all of our building systems and say, right, here's where you guys stand. Here's what you want to think about. Here are the fines. Here's the technology, and here's the sort of outline all of the options that we have in front of us from a strictly carbon reduction emissions perspective. And we were able to take that and incorporate it into our thinking. And so they listed a bunch of technologies for us to consider. Basically they confirm what we already knew, which is available on the Accelerator website, that if we do nothing, we'll be fine free until 2035. That's good to know for our planning. Eventually our boiler will go away. We'll have to electrify in some capacity. We're not sure how yet. We're thinking about that. We should look at that. We should address the building envelope before we address the heating replacement. Different kinds of heat pumps, ultimately hot water generation, and all of these things. Number of small things we can do to help make our home more efficient. So next slide, please. So this is sort of like one of the cruxes of it for me is this slide, which shows the fine structure as they're mapping out for us. So we're a sample building. Our emissions are in the top line. 193 metric tons of CO2. We have right about now, but it's going down. The carbon cap you see is 360, and fines are avoided in the first tranche of dates through 2034 rather. The fines are also avoided. But they have to map out. They sort of have to bunch projects for us and say, right, if you do this bunch of projects, you can push your fines out by 5 more years. So this tranche of projects, you can push it out even more. We said this is great to see these numbers. And some folks look at this chart and said, Michael, why are you worried? These numbers are 12 years away. Why do I even care about that? What's $5,000 in our operating budget? It doesn't matter. And I had to remind people that in a co-op with a co-op governance structure, everything takes a lot of time. And so I don't want to start a project in 2035 when I'm already paying $7,000 in fines. I want to preempt that now. And we have the time to do that now. That's sort of been our motivation to sort of say, listen, these fines, there's no reason to pay these fines. We've already taken simple steps at very low expense and taken great strides there. We can keep on this path and learn more about the process and keep going. So that's been our sort of mantra going forward, and Bright Power has been helping with that. Next slide, please. So they went through some different technologies that we should be looking at. For example, hybrid window heat pumps, which function around down to about 40 degrees, which could be used in the shoulder season. So maybe like October, November, or like March, April. Take some of the load off your boiler. That was one piece of technology for us to consider. And they estimated the carbon reductions for that and the cost of installing them. There may be some power concerns. We have ACs in the window right now, which are no one's favorite. Maybe that power could be used for these heat pumps, which also provide AC as well. One option. Next slide, please. They also recommended package terminal heat pumps, which are a more robust solution, which require a bit more power, but they can operate as low as 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So more of a full year-round solution and a full replacement for our boiler, not just a shoulder season replacement. So there's some different levels of technology, and Bright Power even acknowledged it's just 2 options that are available today. Other technologies will be available in the future to think about. This as an intervention is a significant intervention, so it's a big cost, but there are incentives to think about as we're planning all of this. Next slide, please. So we took all of Bright Power's recommendations, put them in a table, capturing also their carbon reduction estimates as well, and just put them side by side. We also, because we're in a historic district, which has its pros and cons. Some of these expenses, many of them will qualify for a 20% historic preservation tax credit, which is useful to help us incentivize to get some of this work done. And we're trying to sort of look at these numbers in aggregate and sort of see what makes the most sense. So, for example, new windows are a significant expense, but there's also a good carbon reduction emissions there. It's about 15.8% reductions in emissions. Heat pumps, if we go with the full heat pumps, that's almost a third. If we did hybrid heat pumps, that's also a good reduction in emissions because it takes the burden off our boiler, though it does increase our electrical costs because we're now using electricity to heat and cool, to heat our units. One thing Joseph said, which is really helpful, I think, is that heat pumps are our building is all the heat is provided free. You know, free as part of the maintenance to the whole building. You can control it by turning off your radiator, but you can't get more. If you want it hotter, you have to sort of open all your radiators and make sure they're all working. But you really can't crank the heat in your building anymore. Our building used to just crank the heat endlessly, and you'd come home in the evening in the wintertime and just start shedding layers because it would be so hot, opening windows in January, this kind of thing. We're out of that phase now. That's why we have an A. I think it's a big part of why we have an A. But one of the things that's kind of enticing is that even though we control the heat centrally with these sensor systems in various units, heat pumps will start to align the billing of the heat, who pays for the heat with who's actually using the heat. So if you have heat in your apartment and you have a heat pump, if you want to have it hotter or cooler, you can control that, and hopefully if it's billed electrically through your meter, you'll be paying for that extra heat or saving if you choose to. So sort of aligning those two things is important for us. Eventually, right now we're not there, but one of the selling points is that when we do this, it's in future, you will have that flexibility as a shareholder, as a resident, which is kind of rare in New York. It's not the norm essentially for these old buildings. Just worth noting that. So next slide. So when we talk about this with shareholders, I think it's difficult for folks to sort of imagine when they see a timeline or numbers that people tend to think of it in very hard and concrete terms. And what I want to do is sort of break away from that and remind everyone these are rough. These are planning numbers that we're looking ahead, several years, 30 years in some cases. There's lots of things changing, like interest rates, tax incentives, all of this. It's all very much in flux, and we're trying to get a sense of the numbers just to have a dialogue, but it's very rough just for planning purposes. Next slide, please. One shareholder said to me, Michael, you cannot possibly predict the future. You don't know what's going to happen in 30 years. How can you can't even do this? This is impossible. It's not possible to do this. And so he said, well, it's not possible in some levels, but in some ways we do have a sense of what's going on. We know our gas lines are 85 years old. We know our boiler, the age of our boiler and our windows and everything else in our building. We have a sense of what the ages of all those things are as a starting point. We did a lot of exterior work last year, or about 5 years ago rather. So we know how old some of that masonry is and all of that. Next slide, please. When we look at a timeline, though, and you can even go one more slide forward, Anjali, we do know some things in the future. We know we have these emission limits that are coming. That's when we're going to start seeing fines, 2035, 2040, 2050. Next slide. We also know that we've been on this refinance schedule for a few years, where every 10 years we refinance our debt. So those dates, when you overlay them, they start to indicate that there are opportunities for money to come into the building that's a loan, whether it's primary debt or secondary debt, which is worth thinking about. Next slide, please. So when we look at, for example, we had expenses across the top and benefits on the bottom. We had an elevator replacement, a brand new elevator we put in about 2-3 years ago. It costs us about $250,000. We assessed for it, but there were some credits that came back to the shareholders because of that, $60,000 in credits. That was mostly historic preservation, but we were sort of modeling credits coming back to shareholders, and they're sort of learned to trust this process that we're sort of living in, where credits come after the projects in some cases. And so how do we plan for that? Next slide, please. So last year we did the local 97 study with Bright Power. It was a modest expense, but it helped us get the numbers together to start thinking about all these things in time. Next slide. The big item, of course, is heat electrification of the heating. And what we learned from Bright Power is that can happen way in the future, likely after 2035. So we could start thinking about it at that time frame. Before that, next slide, please. The critical next step is, the critical piece of this is new windows sometime before electrification. In other words, seal the building envelope, make sure all drafty windows are replaced, upgraded, thermally insulated, etc. Then start sizing your heating infrastructure, the new heating infrastructure. That's sort of the main before and after, or critical path item at this sort of large scale. Next slide, please. So they've also recommended hybrid window heat pumps. Right now we have in-unit air conditioners, which are kind of a nightmare and very boring to take in and out, I will say. If we're going to spend the money on new windows, having those air conditioners, frankly, makes me nervous. We're going to spend $2 million on new windows somehow. Having the old ACs is not part of that plan, or not desirable. So one thought is, can we use hybrid window heat pumps to either be put in before, during, after, to allow us to preserve our windows so that we don't damage our new windows, but also take the burden off our boiler so it can last longer before we're ready to replace it. Next slide, please. Hot water heaters can be replaced almost anytime. They're a lower emitter, so that can happen anytime in this time frame. Next slide, please. On a time of our choosing. We know that we all have gas stoves in our particular building, so electrifying them is a concern for some. We're still figuring out how that would work. One thought is, ideally you would replace or give shareholders the option to go from gas to electrics before the windows are sealed. So before we put in new windows and seal all the emissions from stoves into people's apartments, give them the option to replace the stoves with electric if they choose to before the windows are done. That might not work for us, but we're exploring to see what that means. Next slide, please. Boiler balancing is a minor thing, but it's something that we can do to sort of extend the life of our boiler, make it more efficient in the interim. Next slide, please. We also have to apply for a load letter from Con Ed to sort of understand, looking at all these systems: electric hot water, electric heating, heat pumps, stove electrification. That's going to take a new load from Con Ed. We have to apply for that from Con Ed, and so that's going to take time. So planning for that sooner rather than later is one of our goals. Next slide, please. Rooftop solar doesn't actually reduce our carbon emissions very much, but it does help us reduce our electric bill, which is a savings. And the incentives for rooftop solar at the moment are basically, only positive. We will spend X on solar and we will make X plus, say, $25,000 in the incentives that come back over the subsequent years. And so it's a nice leveraging point to sort of realize, if we do this by this date, when solar is done, money will flow back to the shareholders, so which they can then be assessed back to leapfrog onto the next project, of which there are many. And it's a benefit for shareholders. Next slide, please. And dryers are the last thing to sort of think about as far as how we electrify them and when. They're a small emitter, as are the stoves, but we want to just make sure we're thinking about it in our planning. So the last slide, I think, or second to last slide. All of these projects have incentives in them, whether it's IRA money from NYCR or Con Ed. In our case, we were eligible for this historic preservation tax credit of 20%. But figuring out how those all factor in, that is a huge learning curve, which we're still learning about. Helps us to achieve this vision in some capacity. These things are changing frequently, but looking at, I think, emissions limits, refinance, and then structuring your projects in time, it's not impossible, and we're starting to do it, and we're learning as we go, and it's been fruitful. So I think that's it. Is there anything else in that? That's the last slide. Yeah, and we have some follow-up with Bright Power. We want to look at following up with them on balancing the steam system, getting a load letter filed at some point, because that will take time. And if for example, Con Ed says, right, you don't have the power on the street, you're 6 years away from it, that's fine. We at least have the sense of, we can start to plan for when those upgrades will have to happen. Bringing power to the street will cost us money. When can we plan for that in our financing plan? And then also learning about the more incentives. So yeah, and we're pursuing solar in the meantime. We're trying to pursue the solar in the meantime. So that's what we're up to at our building.
Michael, very nicely said.
Could you put your contact info in the chat? Because I'm involved in the building that is doing this also right now.
Oh, cool. Yeah, sure. I'll put it in right now.
So open for questions. I see some earlier in the chat that maybe we can pull back up for Michael or Joey to respond to. The first was, I was very curious about this one too, regarding incentives and benefits for homes under 25,000 square feet. And I know we have a few people on the line here that might be able to answer that from different perspectives. We'll start with Michael. Any thoughts on that?
Under 25,000 square feet? I don't think it's required. The local law doesn't apply to like apartment buildings that are under 25,000 square feet, but
Right.
There's still things you can. I mean, at least it doesn't apply yet. Joseph may know more about that, but this doesn't mean you can't do things like put solar on, start composting, even just rein in your heating bill by putting an energy management system in place. You can do all that stuff for relatively cheap compared to the savings that you'll reap on it, I would say.
I think also another inflection on that question is incentives and benefits. And one thing I believe Philip might have added to the chat, a resource for Electrify NYC that is specifically for homes that are in that 1 to 4 family home range. And I just want to also invite Deepa and Paul, who I know have done a lot of work around the federal tax incentives, to share any thoughts there.
So, okay, so the first point was about renters. And so I highlighted in the, that there's a summary of things that renters can do in that presentation that I put into the chat. And there's a 4-page detail in there. So there's a lot of stuff that renters can do, whether it be like putting in their own like portable induction stove and other things like that. So that's one thing that's in that presentation. So I encourage people to take a look at that. And if you're in a property that's under 25,000, the other thing that we recommend strongly is that you try to get onto the co-op and condo board, right? Which is something that Michael did with great effect, because then you're in the conversations and you're helping to steer the conversations the right way. And it's really important. I think it's an important thing as an owner or a shareholder, because when you walk into a building that has a D on it these days, like the first thing I think is not that this is, I think that there's something bad about the management of that condo or co-op. Like there's something dysfunctional, because why haven't they started to address this? So I would not be very willing to invest in that property personally. So I think that that's something just to keep in mind, and one way to put pressure on the others on the board is to say that, this is eventually going to reduce, resale values of our properties if you don't address this. But I think, if you're in a condo or a co-op, then you have more rights than a renter. But really, to get things done, you really need to go and get on the board. In some co-ops and condos, you can also, if you have an in-unit dryer or a stove, you may be able to change those, as I did. I'm in a condo and I was able to change those 2 items. And those 2 items do have incentives, which are also in that presentation, which I put in the chat. But they're primarily for low and moderate income individuals, and they're for $840 rebate. That's a program that hasn't been finalized yet, but is coming in the probably by the end of the year. So Deepa, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, I don't think I have anything to add. Thanks, Paul. I think you covered it pretty well.
Okay.
I see 2 comments or questions from Carol Reingold in the chat. Carol, do you want to hop on to ask your question out loud?
Sure. So I had a specific question, because I'm in a co-op also. We have individual electric, and each person would have to individually upgrade. And I was wondering if that was the case for you, and if it was, then why you went ahead and checked the load for the whole building. I mean, how does that work?
So electrification. So for us, there's a few things. One is stove, which is just providing a receptacle at the stove location, at the range location for induction stoves. The other thing is, if we do, whether it's hybrid heat pumps, we would do a receptacle at the side of the window. We already have that because the air conditioners were power for that was put in like maybe 40 years ago for AC units as part of the city mandate. But if we are going to electrify our heating from gas to electric, that's a significant electric load that has to be accommodated. So that's the main driver, as well as like dryers and things. But the main driver is the heating load. If it's no longer gas, it has to be electric, and we're going to need a service upgrade for that. And that's the lion's share of the Con Ed ask.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing was the historic building credit. I had never heard of that, not in the West Village.
I only learned about it through researching solar, and they really listed it as one of the credits we're eligible for. And I was like, what is that? And we learned about it, and it's really good. And the state Department of Parks and Recreation they administer it, and they're actually really helpful. If you're in a historic district, they will help you file for it. It requires 5% of the work to be on the exterior facade, but other projects can qualify. You can bundle your project over 2 or 3 years and file it all at once. The money comes back to the shareholders, which could then be assessed back by the co-op board to fund the next thing, unless your building doesn't need any repairs, in which case you can leave those shareholders keep it, which is probably not the best way to do it. But yeah, it's really useful. It's really useful. It's a good tool to be
And
aware
is
of.
Windows considered exterior? Because
Windows are considered exterior. Yeah, they qualify for that.
we can't do much exteriorly because we're in a historic district.
Sorry, the
There's
one
not much
caveat to that
room.
is if you do touch the facade and you're filing for the tax credit, in this case, landmarks, you need to sign off on whatever work you're doing. So you may want to hire an architect or have landmarks give us, approve whatever facade work you're doing or any exterior work that you're doing, whether it's windows or masonry or whatever it is. When they sign off on it, that's sort of the golden ticket in a sense to go to the state and say, right, we've done this bit of work and here's all these other projects as well. We now are eligible for our tax credit.
Hey, Michael, quick question. Does your building burn natural gas or oil?
It used to burn both. It still burns both officially, but we basically have retired the oil tank. We don't use it much anymore, hardly ever. We've been on almost all natural gas, firm gas, for about 3 or 4 years.
Is that just because you're being more efficient, or did you change
no,
something?
I think it's just easier. Like National Grid put in firm gas on our street. It was sort of an easy thing to do. We said fine, but it's not. I mean, it's still a fossil fuel. It's just as dirty net at the end of the day. So, and it is less wear and tear on your boiler because the gas burns a little bit cleaner than the oil does. But I think it's negligible.
Don't worry.
Do you have an estimate of how much less money you saved by switching from gas to oil, or does it not save you money?
I don't have that
oil.
breakdown per se. The oil was getting expensive. I don't have that breakdown per se. The bigger thing is just like turning down the damn thermostat. That was like the bigger thing, and then
Right.
changing the culture to have everyone learn how to shut windows, take out ACs, all that kind of stuff, report broken windows, that kind
The
of thing.
payback for you going, unfortunately, we have high cost electricity in New York City.
Right.
So that, I mean, heat pumps can be at least use 3 times less energy, or 1/3 of the energy of a natural gas boiler or any fossil fuel fired boiler, but our electricity cost is high. So I'm definitely interested in your projected payback for going, if you were going to heat pump systems now, existing technology now, compared to the natural gas you're burning in your boiler. What, will it cost more on an operating basis, or will there be a payback? That's a very, will you be able to actually save money on going to electricity?
That's one of the big questions for us to answer in the coming years.
Yeah.
We're looking at putting a solar array on our roof and just maxing out our roof because we have a
Yeah.
good roof for that. That'll help a little bit, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to cover nearly what we need to
Right.
generate. But yeah, that's a big question for us.
Right.
I think as the grid gets greener too over the next decade with offshore wind, more
Yeah.
solar array. I mean, solar is basically free right now. And once you pony up the cash, all the refunds come back and it pays for it. So it's like as the grid greens slowly over the next decade, hoping the cost will come down, but it's a challenge.
I see a question from Elena Dunham in the chat. Elena, do you want to ask your question out loud, or I'm happy to also ask it on your behalf.
Sure. I just, I'm still trying to aggregate information I can share with my building's board. And I hear your points about the letter grades depleting people's perception of the value of apartments. And I am aboard with your idea that once the credits start showing up, people will cultivate some patience for this process. And I actually took a lot of notes on your graphic with all of the savings over time, Michael. But I guess I'm just wondering if there are other tips, because I feel like the issue of time scale is very tricky for when you have an older population of residents who are all anticipating selling their apartments in the next 10 years.
Yep.
I feel like I'm middle-aged, but I'm very much one of the youngest people to be able to speak up and say, we need to do this. And I'm having trouble figuring out how to convince them. Yes,
that's a great question. And I even had someone in my building who was joking that her gas stove would only leave after her coffin leaves and not a moment before that. And we're like, whoa, we don't want you going anywhere. We want to keep you all here. But I think one point is like, even passing on one's department through an estate to next of kin, like if the building is getting fines every year because it's not compliant, that's a problem. It's going to affect that value. So the equity starts to diminish. So that's a real argument to start using. And if they're thinking about a 10-year time frame, guess what? So is Local 97. There's lots of things you can do now, like LED lights, like energy management systems that you can install to sort of get the ball rolling. That's what we found to be the case, and people start to see that. I think also too is about maybe 8 years ago, we started doing quarterly meetings in our building. So the board every 3 months gets out there in front of the shareholders and say, here's what we're working on, here's what we're doing. And instead of a culture where the co-op shareholders say, well, the board doesn't tell us anything, now it's the other way around. The board tells you everything, and it's on the shareholders to get on board and be informed and be educated. And it builds community as well, which is good, which is what we want. That's the way we want to live in. So it's a tough argument, but maybe using that next of kin could be a tool in your toolkit, Elena.
A follow-up question on some of the value and valuation questions is, no matter what here, this requires capital outlays. And I know that theoretically the New York Green Bank is involved in thinking about solutions, but it seems to me like, just looking at the number 2 million that you had for the windows, right? The capital gap is huge. How are the two of you or anyone on the phone observing like how we're going to bridge that gap?
I'll take this. That 2 million, have you applied Con Edison, National Grid, or NYCR incentives? I
So
don't.
sorry, Joseph, were you asking me?
I'm addressing the question here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you go for it.
So yeah, we actually were adjusting this over the last 2 weeks trying to figure this out. The $2 million number is a big number. If, for example, we did solar like this year and got the tax credits for that to come back, that's more than the value of the panels, which is about $250,000. That's like maybe 12% of a $2 million window number. If we time that with some refi money, like currently our mortgage doesn't allow secondary debt, which is unfortunate. When we refinance in 2 years, we want to make sure that we have secondary debt possible. Take out some money for our long-term mortgage, but also take out some secondary debt that can cover the incentives. So I think we estimated on a $2 million window job for our building, we estimated that the incentives might be in the range of like $750,000 from historic preservation, from NYCR, from the IRA. Some of those are based on, how many square feet is your building, or how many BTUs of energy are you saving. So it's a bit of a convoluted puzzle to figure out, but it's definitely doable and definitely possible. And so if you're going to get tax credits back, if you can do a short-term loan, a secondary debt loan that can then be paid off by the tax credits, that rather than just hand to the shareholders who can then walk away, that money can be recirculated to retire that debt. And you can start to sort of chip away at that $2 million number over time. It's a big number, but it just takes, with some thought and some planning, you can make it work rather than just going into it blindly. That's where we're at right now, is making that case to shareholders.
Yeah, and they are an improvement.
Yes,
the windows are an improvement, and the noise alone is tremendous with properly sealed sealed windows.
Are there low interest loans available through some of these programs? Yeah. Joseph, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, with proper proposal or project budget numbers, we can engage the New York City Accelerator financing team and engage those lenders. There are green bank, oriented lenders. Yeah, absolutely.
Does anyone else have other questions for speakers? I see a little trickle that came in, but now is your moment. Go ahead.
Well, I had it. Oh, I'm sorry. I did have a question that was earlier that didn't get answered. I'm just confused about some of the other laws for green roof and solar there. Does that mean people have to put solar and green roof, or what do those laws say? I mean,
that's very much specific to new construction or permit oriented work, not for existing buildings.
Yeah.
I do have a question, if you don't mind.
Go for it, Ben.
Thank you. I put it in the chat. I'm not in New York. I grew up in Brooklyn, and my mother still lives there, and she has a gas-fired, forced hot water heating. But I'm on here because my company's developed a high-efficiency, highly versatile heat pump AC boiler that we're going to license to manufacturers. And my question for you guys is, when you factor in the incentives that are available, first of all, can I get a copy of the presentations that were presented earlier? If that's doable, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And beyond that, my question is, do you think that the incentives being offered, especially Mr. Parrella, are sufficient, for example, for your board to justify the expense and the outlay, because people do respond to economic drivers. And my question is, are the fines sufficient enough to force people to do the things? Are the incentives being offered sufficient to, additionally justify it? And how much resistance do you find among your fellow, co-op members?
I think, I wouldn't complain if the incentives were higher or better. I think the main thing is very few of the shareholders are engaged in the governance of the building. As shareholders, we are owners. We have to be responsible. We have to understand how our buildings are governed. And so we have to learn what the landscape is that we're working in. How old is our building? What needs to be done? In what order? What financing options are available? How can we structure a deal that's right for our building? What works for our building financially might not work for another building. And so how much debt are we comfortable taking on versus someone else? What's our maintenance fee at as a starting point? It's all very customized. There's no one size fits all solution. It's a lot of work, but as you dig into it, you'll learn more. I mean, Ben, you're not you don't live in New York, but it has to be a community effort. It has to be a group teaching exercise. Otherwise, I think it becomes very difficult. But showing the incentives in reality, running, like I mentioned, we did our elevator a few years ago, and we got money back for that. And people, I mean, at one point we were trying to tell everyone about the incentives, and some people didn't even know about it. We're like, we've emailed, we've sent flyers out, we've done presentations, and one person had no idea what we're talking about because they were totally disconnected. They weren't engaged. So even trying to give money away is hard sometimes for a co-op board, but we just keep at it.
Right. And one final follow-up. Basically, look, we're being supported by NYCR, my company has. We've got patented proven technology. This is a heat pump boiler and an air-to-air heat pump air conditioner. So we can heat and cool in temperatures from -37 up to over 140 degrees Fahrenheit and maintain system capacity across the temperature range. This is not a pitch. I don't want to get into the spiel, but basically, we've got something that we're going to enter the New York market with as the low-hanging fruit because of the regulatory drivers. And
Yeah.
we've already got an identified site for a demonstration installation in Upper Manhattan. And, we are also interested in additional potential installation. And, look, the beauty of this, honestly, is that we can also cut your power use so that overall this does significantly, sort of compensate for the expense of the cost of doing it. So I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody on here who might be interested in working with us on a demonstration or a pilot. I'm not here to pitch, but I'm happy to leave my email address in the chat if anybody wants to get.
Yeah, Ben, please do. This is music to my ears.
And I
It's
also
really
want to, with
cool.
our 15 minutes left, I want to make sure we are actually letting you go a little early and make sure we also get to Philip and Paul's final questions as our final ones.
Yes, there's a policy idea that we might want to consider, and that is to allow the fines to be actually held in escrow, any fines of the enforcement of the bill, so that they could be held in escrow for buildings that do generate a coherent plan for decarbonization, and they can use their fines towards helping to finance it, as opposed to just going into the city general fund or whatever.
Yeah.
And that would be a way to make sure that even at buildings that decide to wait longer, that it's not the right time to do this, or they have to save more money up, and if they would ordinarily be getting fined, those fines should be available to help meet the decarbonization efforts. So that's possibly a policy that we'd want to support.
Yeah, in terms of advocacy, absolutely. But in terms of your specific building, we could consider mediated resolutions, good faith effort, and adjusted compliance.
Yeah.
Contact Accelerator. That's the take-home point of this whole meeting.
Paul, want to be our final question?
Oh, that puts a lot of pressure on me. So, I wanted to comment on the comments that there's a large cost to the electric heat replacement. The 2 million, and I think this is a pitfall that we often fall into, because what we need to do is we need to look at that cost versus the cost of replacing the 85-year-old or however old it was, you know, furnace and boiler that are there. So, and then in addition to that, the reduced cost of running those, in terms of maintenance and fuel. So when we talk about, like, when we just leave the conversation at, okay, it's 2 million, and not say, okay, well, the alternative is like, like when you go to buy a car, yeah, you can pay $50,000 for a car, an EV, or if you buy a fossil fuel car, you're also paying 50,000 and you get the 7,500 credit on the EV. So that's what, I think, that I'm sure that'll be helpful for when you talk to your co-op shareholders, that this is not just like an expense, it's like a comparison of two expenses and two cost streams, expense streams to maintain those investments. And I think that might help the discussion become a bit more realistic. So that was one thing. And then the other thing, I just wanted to ask a question. When we green the grid, so like, I know that the New York City grid is very highly reliant on fossil fuels. And I know that there's like the Canadian hydropower electricity coming in, then soon there'll be wind coming in off of Long Island. And eventually, we'll get to like the rest of the state where it's very, low carbon. Do all of those benefits flow through to the co-ops and condos under local law 97?
Yes, it is New York State wide. What is it? It's a 70% reduction by 2030 and 100% by 2040 for the CLCPA. So that does factor into local lending.
Okay.
Okay, I see we have one more question we're going to squeeze in from Francesca. Go for it.
Well, actually, it's a comment. I just, and also I wanted to ask Ben to please put his contact information in the chat. I don't think he's seen that. I'm engaged in, as I said before, in a project like this, and we did spec out the difference between replacing our incredibly aging oil boiler with a dual fuel gas, more high efficiency unit versus heat pumps. And with the incentives, the heat pumps are cheaper. And one way that we are dealing with the fact that, I mean, at this point, the building pays for the fuel for the boiler, but the individual shareholders pay for their electric bill. So the co-op has decided that the savings on the installation of the heat pumps and all that is going to, and the savings on the fuel oil is going to translate to a rebate that the building is going to give back to the individual shareholders to help them with the increased cost of their electric bill. So I think that's something buildings should consider. If they're saving a huge amount of money on fuel, they should rebate it back to the shareholders.
All right. Thank you, everyone, so much. We have 10 more minutes left before the end of the hour, and I promised I would let everyone go a little early. So you can consider this your moment. If you want to bow out and eat your dinner, this is the moment, but we'll stick around on the line up until for the next 10 minutes for any just open space conversation. I did want to acknowledge, I know a couple people asked about recordings and that kind of thing. We will definitely, this was recorded for the purposes of sharing, but we'll also just check in with the speakers on that before it goes up. Paul and Deepa, did you want to share anything about location for recorded presentations?
Yeah, the presentation is usually held on our YouTube channel, and I'll try to put that into the chat quickly. And you can also find it on our website. There's a link to the YouTube channel on our website, and we put the I don't know where we can put the presentation. We can send it out to everyone that's that's signed up for the presentation. I think is probably the easiest thing.
Awesome. All right, thank you, everyone. And we'll just stick around and roll everything up here for our synthesis and next steps. Feel free to stay on with us.
Yeah, no, let me close out a little bit. I have tremendous appreciation for Anjali for coordinating all of this, Paul for just spearheading the chapter. Michael, you will get a follow-up by me just because we have a building to attend to, but
we'll talk.
at the least, just ensure that you have support with the New York City Accelerator. And I balance my time between volunteerism with the New York City Accelerator, but also with the Climate Reality Project. So do note that there is a training coming up in April. So I think I will get the membership opportunity, the mentorship opportunity. But if anyone is wanting to get a little bit more, deep in the civic engagement opportunity, try the new membership. It could be cool. Learn about civic engagement opportunities, learn about lobbyism, learn about climate science. Al Gore will be there. It could be cool. It's I think April 12th or so.
There you go. You are getting some responses in the chat. And Deepa and Beth, I know you've been really involved in that. If you want to say anything further.
Yeah, I think it's a very important topic to get through, because we need further engagement like this. This has been a fantastic use of my time, of your time. We'll probably have more of these conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say that for anyone who's considering applying to be a mentor, tomorrow is the last day to apply. So make sure you get those applications in. The training application, I think, will continue to be open. So, feel free to apply, share with your networks. We're trying to make this the biggest training ever. And this is the first time the training is being held here in person in New York City. So it's a great opportunity.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It
Thank
was
you.